Welcome again, everyone, to another impromptu episode of the Cookout. We both my co-hosts are away on assignment this week, so I gave my old friend Wasted a call to see if he was up for doing another show. We had so much fun last week. I figured, hey, why not? Let's do another show. How's it going, Wasted?
It's not too bad.
Perfect. What have you been up to this week?
Mostly drinking whiskey.
Oh, nice.
I've done a few episodes of my show.
Yeah, I listened to them. Very good.
I'm a bit of a novice, so it takes me sometimes. Last night I was just hammered, and I couldn't upload the video. It took me 3 hours to export the video from iMovie to Rumble because the file's too big or something. My phone is jammed, so I was wrestling with the technology. What else did it? Oh, and I the fantasy football. I was 20K in the world fantasy football out of 12 million players. So yeah, that's quite high. A 20K finish. People who finish in the 100K, they go on podcasts and tell you, who you should pick.
Who you should, yeah. So
yeah,
when
in the football.
Fantasy football, you're talking about English football, like soccer, right?
Yeah, soccer balls.
So you're in a fantasy league for that?
I just play. I just play. There's an overall league, and I'm in a mini league. And
nice.
I somehow got really high.
Yeah.
Just because I've been playing for years, but normally around Christmas I do really well because I used up all my chips. You can play triple captain or whatever.
Yeah.
So I go out strong, and then after Christmas, with all the fixture congestion, I just lose it, and then I just start plummeting down. So I get quite high, and then I normally plummet down to 1 million or 2 million or something.
Right.
But this year, I just haven't done any. You can do transfers, and you lose points to bring in the players you want. I just haven't done anything like that, and I've stayed pretty what they call it template on the players, and I've watched and I can also kind of guess who's going to score next because I'm following it so closely, So I've made some Brighton players and Kane, and I was on the England play Rashford and Trippier from the World Cup. I had them really, just when they were in form. And somehow I just stayed up there, but I kind of fucked it up. I fucked it up last night a little bit. I shouldn't.
Now, is your team only the EPL, or is it?
It's just the Premier League, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Who's your team?
You mean in overall?
Yeah, in real life.
In real life. Well, I support Coventry City for some reason because I used to live in the Midlands, so you have to pick one of those teams like Aston Villa or Birmingham or. But Coventry are also around there. They won the FA Cup in 1987, but then they were always in a relegation battle every season. So I didn't really support a good team because they're just painful. And then they eventually got relegated. They were almost the longest serving Division 1 team. And then they just went down the divisions, getting relegated till they were in the third division. And I just couldn't take it anymore. So as I got older, I just stopped, follow. And they have all that, where the owners are corrupt and they buy a stadium. They don't actually own their own stadium now. But the other day, they play in the Championship, which is the league below the Premier League. Yeah. And they made it to the playoffs, as in they didn't go straight up into the division. They're in some playoff final, but they lost on penalties to Luton. So they're not going to the Premier League. I was thinking they might be playing in the Premier League next year.
That's not going to happen.
But yeah, it's not going to happen. And they'll probably never get back to that position again. But yeah, with the fantasy football, I was 20K in the world, and I knew that Kane was going to score, but I just stuck with Haaland because I thought maybe Haaland was going to play. I don't really follow it to the deadline. Some people wait to the deadline, and when Haaland isn't going to play, they switch.
Yeah,
so I didn't pick. I don't know how I've done so well. I've done so well by just not making any weird moves. But yeah, Kane played and he scored 2. So I kind of lost rank there, and I ended up being 40K, which is still pretty decent. As in, it's no difference really. It's the difference between Kane like scoring and so
it's pretty similar, I guess, to NFL fantasy is pretty big over here. I don't know about over there, but here, the guys that keep their roster intact and make the minimal moves are usually the guys that do fairly well in the league I'm in anyway, right? So when we have it's hard, man, to pick. You got to be really in tune with it and know your players and know your teams, right? Or
yeah, normally I just make loads of transfers and I have like loads of theories, and you always you sub out, you take out the player that basically scores a hat trick. The player you transfer out, he scores, and the one you bring in like gets injured or something. So you just gotta like. I decided that it's all about being cynical. You just gotta. You can't give away -4s for extra. People do hits like they bring in 3 different players for a hit of like 12 points. If you do that, and those players don't score, you're just going to drop massive amounts of rank. You're starting from -12.
Yeah.
Whereas any of these players can score. But yeah, you sort of have to know when somebody's finished.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been in many, not so many NFL football, fantasy football leagues. I've been in quite a few NHL fantasy leagues, and I've never won, man. I've never even come close because it's just I don't have the time to invest in it to watch the trends and watch the waiver wire and know who to pick and know who to sit. You know what I mean? It's a tough gig.
Last year, I think what I did was I was doing so well early on that I played my triple captain really early because I was really high. I was 7,000, and I was like, I picked this player and I said, well, if he triple captains and he scores like a hat trick, I'm going to go to number 1. So then I can just screenshot it and then retire.
Yeah.
To be number 1 for 1 week or something is good enough, really. I don't even know why I'm playing because you don't even win anything. One of the other leagues, the Sky game, you can win money and tickets to the Champions League finals. This one's all about your kind of, I don't know what it is. It's like a sickness of the mind or something.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, guys get right into it, right? And it takes over, and it's serious business for a lot of guys because there is money on the line and there is big prizes on the line. And if you get in with a big, I think DraftKings is a big one over here, or I think it might have changed since then. But you get in with one of the big ones that you pay good money to get in. The payout is massive, and the prizes are just as big, right? So. I don't know. It's too much for me, man.
I think the Premier League, Fantasy Premier League, is almost like they've sort of marketed it as like you don't get any money. It's all just about the kind of, the spirituality of it or something, or the integrity of having a really high rank.
Yeah.
But people go. It's funny because I was listening to these podcasts at the beginning, and then I realized I'm listening to people that are at a lower rank than me. So they don't really like. Even last night, I listened to a podcast trying to check whether Haaland's going to play or not.
Yeah.
And somebody was saying that they've heard that Salah's not going to start and Haaland is. So, and he totally misled me. If I had just done what I thought, which was pick Kane instead of Haaland for the safety, because Kane always plays, because Tottenham are like a one-man team. I just put the captain on him, then I would have got like the 36 points, or whatever he got, and I may have ended up 10k instead of 40k. But it's like, wow, what's the difference really? Yeah. But after the whole season, doing it, to make the mistake at the end, but still, I don't know. I won some mini leagues.
Yeah.
But nobody gives a shit the next day. It's like last one.
Yeah.
You put so much effort into it, and then the next day nobody's even.
It's just fucking over. The story that was brought to us I think we should talk about it. Is something happened in New York City at an auction this weekend. A guitar from Kurt Cobain, a smashed up guitar, a black left-handed Fender Stratocaster, was auctioned off at the New York Cafe in New York City. $595,000 US, man.
I think it was used during the Nirvana Nevermind sessions, and then Kurt gave it to Mark Lanigan.
Yeah,
So
and it's autographed by, well, I guess it looks like Chris autographed it. I don't see Dave.
And Dave Grohl.
And Dave at the top there, yeah. And then, of course, Kurt at the bottom. It says hello with HELL-O. Mark, love your pal, Kurt, KURDT, Cobain, KOBAIN, washed up rock star. It's just funny to see him spell it KURDT and then the KOBAIN. That's
from the he used to use that like moniker during the Bleach era or early on. Like he changed his name.
Oh, did he?
To be I think it was something to do with to be more like a communist, like Chris Novoselic. You know, Chris is spelled with a K.
Yeah.
And it made his name look more like Eastern European or something. So
okay.
That's what I always thought. But yeah, and he also there was also something about Buddha, his childhood imaginary friend Buddha.
Yeah, it's engraved on the neck plate are the words "Buddha lives," referring to Cobain's imaginary friend from childhood. Crazy, man. Did you ever have an imaginary friend?
Not really an imaginary friend. I had like in the bottom of my Coventry City pencil case.
Yeah.
I used to have this little like rubber animal called Egg. I called it Egbert. It was like a little sort of like turtle thing, and I made like a logo like, and every year it basically had like a kind of looked a bit like Alf from
yeah.
You know Alf, but it was more like it had that little face, but it was just like a little rubber, like pencil, thing that fits on the top of your pencil.
Of course, yeah, we all had those.
Egbert. So every year I'd write Egbert and then the date of the new year, and I had like a little cartoon, like a nose, like a pig, and two eyes and a bit of hair on the top. It looked a bit like Alf.
Nice.
But it wasn't really. I didn't really talk about it, or like Cobain used to talk to Buddha. Like address Buddha in those diaries, those diaries that were released, or his notebooks. It was always talking about Buddha.
What was that documentary? Montage of Heck.
Montage of Heck, yeah.
Yeah, it was a good show. He's fucked up in it, man. Like that last scene. It's one of the last scenes towards the end of the documentary where he's out of his fucking mind, man. He's so high.
You mean on stage?
No, it's when he's at home with Courtney Love, and I think the baby's there too.
Oh, he's holding the baby. I didn't. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and he goes up on the roof. I didn't think he was too out of it.
Yeah, he's so
the thing from Montage of Heck that nobody ever talked about was at the beginning, like when he was younger, like in his teens, there was a group of them used to hang around like abandoned houses, and didn't they go in and like have sex with some like retarded girl in there?
I've heard that story, yes.
And and then a lot of the lyrics are about shame. I don't know which song it is, but he's always talking about shame. I don't know if that is the thing, that event is the thing that made him really didn't dislike himself or something.
Wasn't the song Polly about that?
It sounds like it.
Yeah, I always heard that's what that Polly was like. And then funny enough, it was on the radio, or maybe it was on my Spotify playlist, I don't know, one of the two, and it came on, and it just, I was just flooded with these memories of this story regarding this handicapped girl in the abandoned house, and the lyrics to Polly being about that experience. And once you listen to it with that in mind, it really changes the whole tone of the song, right? Because it's actually quite sinister and quite horrible when you think about it, right?
Yeah, because the way they talked about it in interviews was that it was about like a serial killer holding a kidnapped victim or something like that.
Yeah, it's
like feeding this. And then Something in the Way was more about, it was supposed to be written about living under the bridge or something, like sleeping under the local bridge on the muddy banks of the Wishkar.
That's a live album they have, yeah.
But the river's called the Wishkar or something. Wishkar,
yeah, that's the river that runs through it, yeah. Side note, that live album, Muddy Banks of the Wishkah, is fantastic if you haven't heard it.
I got it when it came out.
Yeah.
Because it was like the after he died, there was Unplugged in New York, and then the Muddy Banks of the Wishkah, and that was like all the live. So there's really good Eagle Has Landed, or the best one is Aneurism.
Oh yeah, that's great. Absolutely, 100%.
That's where you think like they're better than like these other bands. Nobody else can like really do that kind of song.
Yeah. Well, that whole album too, Incesticide. That's their B-side albums, whatever, or B-side album. There's a lot of good songs on that too.
The Vaseline song.
Jesus Don't Want Me, the Sunbeam.
Oh yeah, that's Meat Puppets doing the religious song. Like they did that on Unplugged as well, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
There's those sort of punk rock ones like Turn Around.
Yeah, they're great. I was a big Nirvana fan when I was growing up. I kind of followed that whole, like everybody. Like I was a big fan of Guns N' Roses. I loved Guns N' Roses, and I kind of got sick of them. And Nirvana came on the scene, and I kind of jumped on their bandwagon a bit. So I was pretty into them when they came out, and I remember waiting for In Utero to come out, and when it finally did, I remember getting on cassette, and I had like my old beat up piece of shit car that I used to drive in, and had it in a tape deck. And one of my friends whom I still talk to this day, which is crazy because it's like 30 years ago. I remember he got in my car and he's just like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "It's Nirvana." And he's like, "It's their new album." And he's like, I just remember him stopping and looking at me, and he's like, "This isn't music. This is, this is trash." And I'm like, "That's good, man. It's good." But if you listen to it now, I think it's gotten better. I'm a big fan of In Utero, Incesticide, and of course, Nevermind is really good too. But
it's melodic, isn't it? It's like very underpinned by like actual songwriting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's
the Beatles. It's just like the Beatles meets Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
So there's like that's what they recognized on Bleach, isn't it? The what's that song about the girl? About a girl.
About a girl. Yeah, that's also on the Unplugged album.
Yeah, people recognized this. Like he had this. There was this other like it wasn't just like all just punk noise. He had this kind of like songwriting knack too, which was kind of Beatlesy. And I think didn't the producer like in the studio kind of like recognize this, and I don't know who had the idea to write more melodic songs in the Nevermind sessions, but they seemed to kind of go for that based on About a Girl, and then he wrote these songs that seem to. They're catchy.
Absolutely, they are. They're and that a lot of bands that came out at that time, they wrote very catchy tunes, songs. They're kind of almost like I've referred to it before as this, and some people get it, some people don't, but it's kind of like bubblegum rock, like back in the 60s when they had this kind of new music come out, and then I kind of equate some of the grunge bands as that. I mean, it doesn't sound anything like bubblegum rock, but do you know what I mean? They were very catchy. They were very melodic. They had catchy hooks and choruses that you could sing to,
I think it's is it Kim Deal?
From the Pixies?
No, the Breeders, I think. The Breeders, Kim Deal, the Deal sisters, I think. Weren't they? She started in
Yeah.
You're right. But she was in the Breeders, is what I remember. And when she said that, like Nirvana have the best dumb songs, like the dumbest Ramones songs.
Yeah.
But like once I was thinking that I was listening to Kiss, and I was also listening to Aerosmith a bit, and then I realized that actually Nirvana sound a little bit like Aerosmith if they just couldn't play their instruments and they were on like a load of heroin. Some of the songs are basically like Draw the Line. There's a lot of like Draw the Line type songs in the early Nirvana. So
fair enough.
Just a bit more,
yeah, I could see that. I can agree with that. You did mention the Beatles. I will admit this, I'm not a huge Beatles fan. I never have been. My wife is, and when I was first starting to, I'm a big record collector. And when I was first starting to collect them, I was getting a bunch of Beatles records. I had never listened to them before, and I put on Abbey Road. First time hearing it, this was only about probably 7-8 years ago. It was the first time I heard Abbey Road. I just never listened to it. And I put it on with my wife, and I start listening, and I just look at her, and I said, you can hear a lot of Nirvana in this. Or other way around, right? Like you can hear a lot of the Beatles and Nirvana music, but I could hear where Kurt Cobain got his inspiration from listening to the Beatles because they sounded very similar to me.
Yeah, especially in a way the early Beatles as well, like on Incesticide. He kind of moved from the Beatles, but he moved into other like bands like the Vaselines, which are basically just playing jangly pop. But he also stole like some of the arrangements, not stole, but it's like the wall of sound production on some of the Nirvana stuff, like In Utero. Whereas there's lots of things going on. The melodies is in the background, but there's also like a load of guitars and solos and stuff. But he also just like sort of Lennon, like Polly and Underneath the Bridge. They're a bit like something like All Apologies is something like Lennon would write.
Very much so.
Sounds
very
a bit
much
like watching the Wheels or something.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, interesting. We did bring up the Unplugged album of Nirvana. So with this guitar going for $600,000, which is mind-blowing in itself, it doesn't even work. It's broken, signed. But it's a cool piece of memorabilia. I can understand if somebody has the money to spend that, if they have a big enough place or if it's going somewhere cool. If I had the money, I'd probably get it too. It's not even close in comparison to the amount paid for a Kurt Cobain item. The guitar that Cobain played in the Smells Like Teen Spirit video, 1969 Fender Mustang, that sold for $4.5 million. The most expensive one of his guitars that went up for auction that sold was the MTV Unplugged guitar, and that sold at an auction in 2020 for $6 million. Staggering, man.
That's crazy.
It's nuts.
But it's because it's the last guitar he played in public for the MTV Unplugged.
Yeah, because he died shortly after that set, didn't he? Like weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah, because they, in Heavier Than Heaven, that book, I've forgotten the author.
Okay.
He basically plays. He ends that concert, and then he gets in an elevator with like his press person or some PA in the building, and as he's going down in the elevator, he says, "I was good, wasn't I?" And she said, "Yeah, you were very good."
Really?
And that was like it was kind of like she said that it felt like it was the end of like the end of something. Like he was really like kind of depressed about it, but also I don't know, like he finally decided something.
Well, people forget that just a few weeks before he actually killed himself, he was checked into like a mental asylum or like I don't even know what to call them anymore because they don't exist, but like a mental hospital.
Yeah, it was committed. Yeah.
Yeah, committed. I believe it was in Spain or Italy, wasn't it? And he escaped.
He overdosed on Courtney's Rohypnol in Rome.
Yeah.
And then there's people who think that, it's her prescription. Did she put those in her drink? Was that the first? And she also had she was also tampering with the writing a suicide note.
Yeah.
At that time and things like that. You don't want to go down too deep into that because that can go on for like 5 hours.
You touched on that in your podcast, didn't you, this week?
Yeah. Courtney Love's was she like in an MK Ultra like project?
That's a whole story for another episode, but that's just like scratching the surface.
Yeah, but what you're talking about is that he was put in Courtney did an intervention in Seattle or something, and he went to like a facility, and she always blames herself for staging the intervention and then making him go to rehab because he basically jumped the fence, didn't he, and disappeared.
Long time ago, I used to know this girl. I went to high school with her. She's a close friend of mine. She's down in Hollywood now. So she married an author. Their marriage didn't last very long. It was very short, but the author that she married, his name was Ian Halperin, and he wrote a book called Who Killed Kurt Cobain. Check it out if you haven't. It's very interesting, and he does a podcast talking about Courtney Love and her potential involvement in all this and the conspiracies revolving around that. And yeah, the whole MK Ultra stuff with her, it's way too much to get into right now, but it's crazy to think. And what was the guy's name? He's dead now. He died shortly after it came out, and he basically said that Courtney offered him $20,000.
El Duce.
Yeah, El Duce. That's it. Yes.
He played in like a local band.
That's right.
But yeah, those around that, I've read that book, Who Killed Kurt Cobain, and also there was a biography written by Poppy Z. Bright about Courtney. But there was a point when, like, I think that's also in Heavier Than Heaven. There was a point in their relationship where Kurt was basically living down in a drug house and was just like hiding out from Courtney. And Courtney was also hiding her drug habit from Kurt. This is after the baby's born.
Right.
So they were always like hiding their drug use from each other. And I think that kind of plays into whatever you were talking about.
Yeah.
Which I've forgotten what you were saying. You were saying about
we were talking about his guitar, and it sold for $6.1 million or $6 million.
I was talking about the stuff about the Who Killed Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, there's a whole. I mean, there's the stuff that everybody knows, and the stuff like there's no fingerprints on the shotgun, and the amount of heroin that he took should have been lethal itself, but whatever. There's all that, right? And then there's the whole backstory on Courtney Love and her involvement with MK Ultra right from a child. That's what I was talking about on my podcast. Right.
The basically her dad worked for the Grateful Dead and gave her acid when she was 4.
Yes.
And then she moved around all these different music scenes, London, Liverpool, Seattle, where she did the same thing. She came with a ton of drugs and kind of disrupted the scene.
Yes.
So people have said that was she, and when Kurt died, she was actually having an affair with an FBI agent.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, because every time any of this stuff is on a podcast or it gets like taken down. There was a podcast about it and it got like shut down. But combine all these factors together and you start to see her, but she was abused, as in her dad pimped her out to his friends and things like that. Combine that with all the drug use from a young age, it's a little bit like what happened with Manson, where the CIA are basically like giving them drugs and experimenting with them and then sending them to do things. So she was part of like Julian Cope's scene in the new romantic scene in the UK, and she was a prostitute for the Yakuza in Japan. So she was also sent to Japan. So it looks like she could have been like a informant or somebody who's like infiltrating different scenes.
Incredible.
So that's what I was talking about on my podcast.
Right.
And then you kind of work it into what's happening now. She was on the island with Epstein on the plane and stuff like that. And she hangs around with all those kind of like liberals who, are a bit like sketchy in that way. Yep. So it all kind of, and also, the suicide, the maybe she like, because the letter that she wrote, she tampered with from Soaked in Bleach, they basically, the most damning evidence in Soaked in Bleach documentary is that she was the handwriting. She was learned how to write like Kurt.
On the quote unquote official suicide note, isn't there kind of like a paragraph or the last paragraph?
Yeah, the main letter looks like something from his diary, which doesn't actually talk about him like committing suicide. It's talking about leaving the record industry or something. And then the part at the bottom is more like something that he scrawled just before he like killed himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fishiness going on.
But yeah, there was some comparison done between the handwriting, and also because Courtney tried to do the same thing in Rome. I think what she's really, if you're giving her like any sympathy, is that she was trying to control his death, as in she wanted to write a decent suicide note, and she wanted it to be, be an event, not just a random thing where nobody had any answers. But that can be interpreted a different way as well.
Right.
But it seems like she wanted to like have the suicide note to read at his wake and kind of an official document, and she wanted to control what he said because he's that he loved her and Francis. She didn't want it to just be a random event which nobody
where people could go crazy with stuff to say.
Yeah, she wanted to manipulate it and use it for her, So she probably knew that. She seems to be saying that she knew that she was going to. That she basically knew that he was going to die eventually. Like people were worried about that. So, right. But yeah, there's parts of like in the Barbara Walters interview, she basically thinks it's because of the intervention and she was criticizing because he dropped the baby when he was high. So and that's why she sent him to rehab or something, she committed him to the rehab facility or something. So he was probably feeling really bad. If you just believe like a normal narrative of it, she thinks maybe he killed himself because he felt so bad about dropping the baby and he was a piece of shit. And so but she did say on Barbara Walters' show that there were maybe 8,000 reasons why she would take the blame for it. As in every kind of argument they had could be part of the reason why he killed himself.
Yeah, I guess we'll never know, right? It's so hard to pick and choose which side or what to believe and what not to believe, right? So personally, I think she had something to do with it. That's just me. I'm always on Team Chaos, so
I think she definitely put even in the most basic situation, she was piling on the pressure, as in booking him, trying to get him to do Lollapalooza, like criticize him all the time, about not being a good dad, but he wasn't really being that good a dad. He was like living in a drug house.
Yeah.
But that's what I was saying before when I like totally lost the train, is that El Duce said that Courtney, offered me $60K. But in the book, it's one of those, Courtney and Kurt were going around with like handfuls of pills, and wherever they went, they were kind of like, staggering around with a baby with all these pills, dropping pills on the floor when they're going to the supermarket with all these drugs, and just being a kind of shit show and shouting at each other and kind of staging arguments. And Courtney, like her mum says that she's schizophrenic, as in she doesn't always know what she's doing or saying. So Courtney was going around saying, I need somebody to kill my husband. You know what I mean? And she'd say, I'll give you $60K to kill my husband.
Right. Right.
So there's an element of this. Courtney's a crazy person, clinically like a schizophrenic person, and then somebody took her seriously. But there's also the nanny. I can't remember his name now. Courtney paid him $250,000 after the death to go to Hollywood and go in rehab. He's the one who was like sneaking around and finding the body and things. Yeah. He basically delayed the time. They found the body and then they went to panic mode and had to stage something. And he's part of that. So I think they just, even though he did maybe he just killed himself, but they staged it to look a little bit better or something. I don't know.
Could be. Michael DeWitt was the name of the nanny.
Yeah, DeWitt. But they called him a kind
Callie.
of... Callie, that's it.
Yeah, they called him
a nickname. And then her manager or something said that Kurt was filing for divorce.
Yeah, that was also something that was going on. And that just adds to the whole conspiracy of Courtney being involved somehow with his death, because there was rumors that he was writing her out of any will or any kind of royalties associated with Nirvana. They were all going to his daughter, right?
Yeah, there's something like that. So that was the motive that was hidden.
Yeah.
That possibly. And also there was there were these stories about Kurt, was it flying to Portland, and he booked a flight with 2 seats on it, and there was supposed to be like a girlfriend or something. And then he was also flying and hanging around with Michael Stipe because he wanted to reinvent himself as a sort of solo artist who would make like more acoustic albums like MTV Unplugged. So
I did hear that. I did hear he was going around with Michael Stipe. Yeah.
So Automatic for the People. It's like one of Kurt Cobain's favorite records or something.
It's crazy. There's so much going on with this guy.
But that's why his guitar sells for like $6 million.
Yeah.
Because it's a piece of like history that doesn't seem to really go away. Each level, like now, Courtney's involved in basically the, neoliberal cabal.
Well,
that goes there.
I don't hear much about her anymore. If somebody, I couldn't even tell anybody what she's up to. Like, I don't think she's making any music, is she?
No, she seems to just swing backwards and forwards from being normal and trying to stay close to Frances Bean, and then she has these kind of like spaz outs where she like stalks the boyfriend because that the boyfriend like somehow got one of Kurt's guitars or something. So Courtney was like flying off the handle about this guitar, and she threatened to kill him. So she keeps it kind of pretty normal most of the times, but then the old Courtney comes back. I don't think she's had a movie, has she, or an album since Nobody's Daughter.
I couldn't even tell you. But that story about the guitar, what was going on with that? Like, it was sold to Frances Bean's boyfriend, right? Or given to him, right?
It was probably given to him, and then Courtney probably realized that it's worth at least $600,000. It's like some acoustic guitar or something. Yeah.
It was the $6 million guitar. It was.
I don't think so. It might be one of these guitars that could cost actual money, but somehow he'd got a hold of it and been given it by Frances Bean. And then Courtney didn't agree with this and tried to get it back. And then when he wouldn't give it back, she kind of like threatened to kill him and went off the deep end.
Frances Bean was emancipated from Courtney Love at the time. She married this bloke, whatever his name was, that ended up with the guitar. But she was emancipated from her then drug addicted mother, and they got divorced, and there was no prenup. One of the things that was awarded to him in the ensuing court case was her father's guitar from MTV Unplugged set. This is crazy, man. And now it just sold.
Was that guitar?
It was just sold for $6 million. I mean, she doesn't need the money, obviously, but for this guitar to go to this guy who
that does make sense. Like, Courtney's not always wrong. Like, I remember she was like battling against the record companies for the kind of shitty contracts they get. Sort of like Prince. Not everything she does is wrong.
And of course, there's the famous clip from, I don't know which award show it was. I think it was when she was doing the tour for the Larry Flint movie she did with Woody Harrelson. She had just won an award, I think, and they were doing an interview, and the interviewer asked her for any advice for up-and-coming young actresses. And she said into the mic, she goes, "If Weinstein invites you up to his hotel room, don't go." Yeah.
She was early. She was early on sort of exposing Weinstein, but she also seemed. But because of all her connections and stuff, I think the liberal left, or the Dems or whatever, they all just think that she's like this cool. She's like their cool mascot. So I think that's why she's on the plane to Epstein's Island and things like that. That's why she's tied up, because someone like Epstein is like targeting her, and she's included with all these people. But the thing is, I think it's in Soaked in Bleach. It did show that she basically just has like two. While she was like married to Kurt, she had like 2 girlfriends that she slept with every night.
Really?
So she's not like, she's definitely bisexual, and she was always like cheating on Kurt with different guys continuously. Remember that festival where she cheated? She was in a tent with Evan Dando.
Evan Dando,
the singer from the Lemonheads, just like in a tent at this festival.
No, I don't remember that story, but it's hilarious.
There was a lot of kind of like, she was more of a rock star than Kurt. Kurt was so hooked on heroin, I don't think he wasn't like Keith Richards or something. He didn't have a load of Puerto Rican hookers in his hotel room or something. He's like, he just wanted to be married, didn't he? And maybe do heroin. I don't think he was really into like groupies.
I think he just wanted to be a junkie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Which is
that's what I mean.
weird.
He moved down to that drug house, didn't he? You know, near his mansion. He didn't even live in his mansion. He lived in this kind of junkie house, and he just like the people there said that you couldn't give him enough heroin. Basically, he had
Crazy,
like a sort of, you know, he could take 6 times the sort of normal tolerance. So he had a really bad habit. When you think about these things, you definitely go back. You know, you go back and forth between like the conspiracy and just the normal kind of narrative that he was a junkie. And junkies, like, quite, you know, most of them, quite a lot of them kill themselves because they can't get out of the cycle.
Absolutely.
And then also after Rome, they said that he was never the same. As in, you can get brain damage from ODs, and you can also, his like internal organs may have been damaged to the point where he was living in pain.
He was always complaining of a stomach ache, right? I remember that.
Yeah. Courtney said that was because obviously you just take a pile of pills or drugs, and then when you come off them, your stomach hurts until you get some more. A doctor also said the same thing. Said that he had when he went to a doctor, they just said, you're a junkie. You're like seeking. You're like, you showed drug seeking, tendencies. As in, crazy. They just thought he was there to get the drugs get some pills from them because his stomach hurt. It's kind of like a cover story, like when he said he had narcolepsy because he passed out in an interview.
Just nodding off. Jesus. Yeah. One of
I need a piss break.
All right, go ahead. I'll fill the air here. So we've been talking about Kurt Cobain and kind of wasted in his fantasy soccer or football, as he likes to call it, and Kurt Cobain, and his guitar sold for $600K. Pales in comparison to the guitar that sold for $6 million, is the one he played in the Unplugged album or the Unplugged sessions, whatever. And very few people come across the musical landscape and have the impact that Kurt Cobain does. And I think that's why, even to this day, his memorabilia is selling at such a high price, because he was so iconic, and people look at him now as almost a martyr for bringing in a new era. So it's not surprising that his memorabilia is selling for what it is. So I think Wasted is back. Are you back?
Yeah.
Nice. Well, while Wasted is fixing up his microphone, we've like I said, we've talked about fantasy football, soccer, and Kurt Cobain and Nirvana and the impact they had. And one of the reasons I wanted Wasted to come back on this week, your stories are great. That story about the dog man in the bathroom last week was legendary. I was rolling on the floor laughing when you were telling it. It's such an awesome story. But one of the other stories you told me, and I wanted to get into, you have a story called The Head.
Yeah, well, we were talking about all those bodies. I think we were talking about those bodies dropping in China
at the beginning of the Panda Express there.
Yeah, and I was just saying, because I was on the ground in China at that time. I was just saying that I've lived in China for quite a long time, and those bodies that are dropping, you see that quite a lot because places like Beijing, it's like -20 in the winter. They have brutal
Fahrenheit.
I think it's
-20
Celsius.
Fahrenheit or Celsius. Okay, it's friggin' cold, man.
Yeah, it gets cold and it's very dry because it's near the desert, Gobi Desert. So everybody's got these really dry coughs. Right. And but basically maybe 50% of. I mean, in China you actually have the poor, like really poor people, and they don't actually believe in Western medicine. They believe, they use Chinese medicine mostly. And if they get a fever, they have all these different kind of, ways of treating it, which aren't like Western medicine, like antibiotics or going to the doctor or something. They just put steaming bowls of water under their bed and sweat out the fever. And also you've got like poor people who are, in our world, in the Western world, we would see them as basically being homeless. As in, they live in like a small hut or small room without heating, and then they just wander around. And You know, some of them, they don't have any money, and they just end up dying on the streets when they get sick, you know. So there was that element of it that, you know, when I saw those pictures from the Panda Express at the beginning, I just thought, this is kind of, you could like get this kind of footage anywhere, any day from a Chinese city. And
so I just want to interrupt there for 1 second, if I may. Now, I think what brought on this conversation when we were talking was because I had brought up with you, I said, remember at the very beginning of the quote unquote Panda Express, there was those videos that were seemingly coming out of China of people just dropping dead in the street, and, you know, and widespread panic or whatever. But now you had told me that, because I said those videos can't be real. Looking back, it's so silly right now to even think about that. But you said those videos are probably real, but very misquoted, right? Because it wasn't actually the Panda Express that was killing them. It was because they were homeless, right?
Either homeless or just not. They don't use Western medicine. Yeah. So and there's people who we would class as kind of homeless, as in they live in small rooms, communal places like hutongs, which are basically just like little houses and they don't have heating and things like that. And I can definitely imagine or see that a lot of Chinese, I mean, they have actual poor people who are like on the poverty line, and they would just wander around cities with a fever, and they may just die on the street, especially old people. So it's not really it's not an uncommon thing to see, you know. And that led me on to talk about the kind of the homeless in China, because there isn't really welfare state. A lot of the homeless people that you see on the streets in Chinese cities, they actually live outside the city, a bit like gypsies, but more organized, as in all homeless people in the city are told to go to this one village outside the city, and they all live together, and then they come into the city to beg for money and change in tourist areas, and then they go back out to this village, like a homeless village. So they're not really homeless. They don't have any money or job, but then they're and what they do is they fake, like a lot of them fake being blind to get money off tourists, or they dress like classic like beggars from the Victorian age, you know, in rags. And then some of them pretend not to have like legs. They tuck their legs underneath their bodies, you know, and they have they have one woman was like always used to roll around a kid in a wheelchair, and he was supposed to be paralyzed, but he's not paralyzed, you know. At lunchtime he would like get up and they would take their money and go to McDonald's. so there's this kind of like background of everybody knew that they were kind of faking it, but everybody kind of played along with it in the cities, because it was just like, instead of a welfare state, people would just give them money. Especially tourists would get tricked and give them like 100 yuan, which is about $10.
Right.
So, yeah. So this kind of background, as in you're doing it because you know that there's no other option for them. There's no welfare state in China for like homeless people or like crippled people or people with no legs. But then they also take advantage of the situation a little bit. And then I think we're also talking about because I was on the ground in China at that time when the Panda Express started, there were these like kind of crazy conspiracy theories going around that, you know, what the Panda Express actually was like Ebola and AIDS and SARS-CoV-1 all mixed together. Okay. And the way they translated it was they called it flying AIDS.
Crazy.
They were basically like Alex Jones level conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, that's
basically what Alex Jones was saying at the time. But the whole of like on the street in China, that's what they thought it was. They thought it was some kind of weird combination of all these things. The other conspiracy theory that people were talking about, I don't even know if they thought it was a conspiracy, but they didn't believe that there were only like 700 cases of Panda Express in this city. They sort of believed it would be much more. And there was this story that, you know, when Panda Express first broke out, the 20 million mobile phones went dead.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And just vanished off the network. So they were saying these were the people that basically just died of the Panda Express.
Right. Crazy. You know, when you start to put things together, it really changes your perspective a bit, right?
Yeah, because there's no way at the time that it was like 700 or something. I think 386 was the number that I thought. The number of deaths of COVID in this one city. It just was not believable in a big metropolis city. But they only counted deaths from only the Panda Express.
Right.
They disregarded if you had any other symptoms, which is complete reverse of what they did in the West, where if you died of a heart attack, they just said you died of the Panda Express.
Right.
Yeah. So there was all this kind of background. There's these kind of gypsy homeless people, and all these conspiracy theories, you know, and the homeless community, and so you can see that there's not very much healthcare going on. Like people get by really on sort of ancient Chinese kind of superstition, mostly, and there's not really a proper healthcare system. There is if you go and look for it, you know, but there's a lot of people that just don't. And that kind of brought me to, you know, the head.
Yeah.
This is what I call it. That's what I call it. As in, there was this time, like, my parents came out to visit me in a big, like, Chinese city, like Shanghai. So I would, like, take them to all these tourist destinations. You know, there's the Bund and there's the Pudong, which is like the business sector, like Dubai or something, and there's Yew Gardens, and there's Xintiandi. I think it was in the Pudong area. But wherever you go, it's a bit like Egypt. Like wherever you go, you're being like hunted down by these kind of like beggars or homeless people. And after a bit, you realize you just have to say Bu Yao or Bu Yongla. Means no thank you, and they leave you alone. But if you show any interest, they will just like follow you down the road with like 10 like Omega fake watches, like fake Rolexes.
Nice.
Once I was walking down the road and the guy did the classic thing, like he walked past with his like overcoat on, and he opened up his jacket and he had like a laptop in there. He was trying to sell me like a bootleg laptop on the street.
Yes.
So there's all these kind of, and they switched from Rolexes to USBs. You know, as technology moved along, they switched from Rolexes to like all these like gadgets. Like I think at the time it was like MP3 players. So
Yeah. I remember those. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it used to be like Rolexes and like these watches, like Omega watches. They try to sell you, and then they start trying to sell you all these like Beats headphones as well. Yeah. There was always a guy with like Beats headphones. I think I bought a Beats speaker off one of them once because I was just bored. But anyway, there's this whole like, you know, it's like, I don't know, it's probably like New York or LA. There's just a load of homeless people, and they're all trying to like scam you. And so wherever you go to all these different like tourist destinations, you're going to look at this temple or something, and you basically have to use the underground because like it's the easiest way, because the Shanghai underground's like the 8th wonder of the world or something. It's like this space age like a subway system which will get you to all the tourist places like much easier than a taxi, and for like no money, basically like 20 cents. To go on like a journey. Yeah, it's very cheap.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's very good. But it's all kind of like a network underneath the city, full of shops and malls. You know, you can live. I used to live underground in the subway because of the aircon, and it connects to all the different malls and stuff. And then Pudong is like a Dubai type place. Right. It's all business. But I've forgotten why we were going out there. But I think you can go out to a kind of like temple, and it's like further out. You have to walk there. And as we were coming, we came out of the subway station and we're walking towards this temple. I was like trying to find my way, and I just like look up and I walk, and I just see like there's basically a woman pushing like something in one of those prams, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Like a rickshaw.
Yeah. Not a rickshaw, an actual like a pram, like for kids, like a pushchair. That's the term. It's the pushchair.
Like a carriage?
Yeah, it's just you put a little kid in it and you push them along in it.
Yeah.
And in this pushchair, there was what I can only describe as basically just a head. It was basically a head, and it had no arms. It had little arms coming out from what looked like his jawline. There was no real body, and there's no legs. And it was just sitting in this pushchair. And I just like, because my parents were behind me, so I just like walked past it and went, what the fuck? And then my parents walked past it and looked at it and said nothing, and we just carried on walking. I said, what was that? And my dad just went something like, I think that was the head.
Now, do you think it was because like
it's just they don't have abortion, you know, they don't have proper health care. So babies get born without them even checking if it's going to be all right. But this head, it basically looked like a kind of like a retarded like Frankenstein head. And it was drooling. But its little arm was like, these little arms were like moving and asking for money. So it was like this kind of next level of the paralyzed kid in the pushchair or in a wheelchair. Now they just had this kind of like deformed head. Like
was it
trying
real?
To get you to give them money.
Was it
real? Yeah,
real?
It was totally 100%. Real. It was like real.
Crazy.
It wasn't normal looking. It was very red, almost like it had been burned. Like the skin was very burned, and the forehead was very like like I said, Frankenstein. The forehead was very high. It was almost like a square head. It wasn't really round. It wasn't like a normal head. It was kind of like a box with these little arms. But you just walk past it and you see it, but you didn't want to see it.
Now, do you think, like, I'm trying to put some logic into this. Do you think that maybe they kind of wrapped up the baby or whatever it was, the Frankenstein head, in a way that kind of emphasized its shortcomings? You know what I mean?
I think it's possible that there was definitely some wrapping around it,
right?
But there was no real bulk to the body. If there was a body there, it was a very short, like it had no legs, and it had little arms that were sticking out, and it had maybe a little sort of like chest area or something, like almost like it'd been like legs hadn't either been amputated at birth, or there was a torso partly, but it was basically just sitting. But all you can see is a head. Wow. There was maybe a little bit of wrapping, but there was no real way that you could fit the head and for it to just be sitting on the pushchair in that way. There wasn't much of a body there.
Wow. Did you give them any money?
No, because we just like so. I don't know what the word is. It's shock and like not shock and horror.
Absolutely,
disbelief.
I don't even think I would know how to react if I saw something like that.
Because you're just walking along, and then you basically as I go towards them, I know that they're beggars.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like blanking them, but then when I look down, I just see this like atrocity.
Yeah. Like I could understand if like there's homeless people everywhere and there's homeless people here. So I can understand that instead of seeing a baby, maybe you see a dog, maybe you see an animal, whatever, or maybe you see some of their belongings in there. But I think the last thing you're expecting to see is a head, especially a live head with no arms or legs that, But
it was kind of talking as well, as in it was saying something like, ah. Like, it was asking for money. It knew its job. It wasn't like it wasn't just a dead head. But I've definitely seen that in China as well, where a pram comes along, and then you have a look in to see the baby.
Yeah.
As you walk by, and it's like a little dog.
Yeah, of course.
In a suit or so, like in a little jacket or something.
Yeah. It's not even just the homeless or the less fortunate that are having the dogs in their carriages here. I mean, it's the suburban. Yeah. It's the suburban Karens, right, that have their dogs in there, and it's disturbing. Yeah. It's disturbing to see, man.
In China, it was like the Burberry prams with a little poodle wearing Burberry.
Yeah. I don't know.
All those little dogs. I don't know why you'd want to have a dog if you live in an apartment, like in your house. You've got the thing that happened was once I went around to see a colleague from.
Are you there? Well, it seems we've lost Wasted once again. Maybe that should be a good finishing point for the episode tonight. We've been on for quite well over an hour now. So, Wasted, are you there? Can you hear me? We'll give him a couple more minutes. I just wanted to take this time to thank everyone for listening. This is a project that I've been working on for a few months now, and I'm hoping to see it through and come to fruition with the vision that I have for it. And I couldn't have done it without the start I got on the previous podcast. And I just wanted to take a quick opportunity to say thanks to everybody that worked on that podcast with me, including Brasky. We kind of ended on a sour note, but we have hashed things out, and we're on speaking terms now, which makes me happy. So I wish Brasky the best. With whatever he does, I know he's going to be successful in doing it. So I thank him and all the good times that we had, and I hopefully look forward to some more good times. And, of course, I want to thank Wasted for being on tonight. He was a great guest at short notice, and I think he delivered once again like only Wasted can. So once again, thank you everybody. Thanks for listening. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got a Rumble channel. It's the Cookout. Look them up, hit like and subscribe. I'm also on Spotify, and I'm getting my way on to Google and Apple as well. So look for me there, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. That's where the main ones are right now. And I only hope to grow this and get it to where I want it to be. And hopefully next episode, my two co-hosts are back. They're both on vacation, or as we say, on assignment. So I miss you guys, and all the best. All right. Talk to you soon, everyone. Thanks.